Jackie, thank you. The president's new point man on immigration enforcement in Minnesota on the job tonight amid that continuing outrage over the administration's handling of the anti-ICE protests in Minneapolis. Correspondent Garrett Tenney has the story from Minnesota. Good evening, Garrett.
Brett, good evening. We are continuing to learn more about the shooting of Alex Preddy. In a notice to Congress obtained by the Associated Press, DHS says 2 federal agents fired shots in that deadly encounter that is now under investigation. White House border czar Tom Homan is on the ground in Minnesota, taking over the Trump administration's immigration enforcement operations in the Twin Cities after weeks of escalating tensions and the shooting deaths of 2 U.S. citizens. Homan meeting today with Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, who both described the talks as productive. Walz says he reiterated Minnesota's priorities that he also shared on his phone call with President Trump on Monday.
I asked that we have a fair and independent investigation into the murder of both Renee Good and Alex. And I said we just have to reduce these numbers. We started out with that, and he pledged that, look, I'm going to send Tom Homan in. We'll do things differently.
Overnight, activists targeted a hotel in the Minneapolis suburb of Maple Grove, where they believed Border Patrol Commander Greg Bavino was staying while overseeing operations before being sent back to his duties in El Centro, California.
I hereby declare this an unlawful assembly.
Unlike what we've seen in Minneapolis, local Maple Grove police showed up fairly quickly and arrested more than 24 people.
Getting fired is not justice. Their man needs to be brought to trial for what he's wrought on Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota. Get out of the way.
With Bavino's exit and a shift from his more aggressive tactics, some locals are hopeful the change will help calm things down.
It's definitely encouraging, but I also don't want to get complacent. I don't think we can definitively say that it's over.
The head of ICE is also now facing heat from a federal judge in Minneapolis who wrote late Monday the court's patience is at an end and ordered Todd Lyons to appear in court on Friday to explain why he shouldn't be held in contempt for alleged violations of court orders in immigration cases. It's now not clear if that hearing will happen, though, because late this afternoon, federal authorities released the Ecuadorian man whose case is at the center of that judge's frustrations. We have also learned that a separate federal judge in Texas has issued a temporary restraining order blocking the Trump administration from deporting the 5-year-old boy and his father, whose case quickly went viral last week after they were arrested in Minneapolis when school officials claimed that federal agents were using the boy as bait to arrest his family that were inside the home. Allegations that the Trump administration vehemently denies. Brett?
Garrett Tenney, live in Minneapolis.
Brett Baer joins us now. Brett, first off, what about the change? We haven't seen much change outside Michael Waltz going to the UN. We have not seen much change with this White House. But now Kristi Noem, after a 2-hour meeting along with Corey Lewandowski and the president in the White House, is no longer in charge of Minneapolis. And I don't think any of these, I think more than likely any of these city operations. What do you think?
Yeah, good morning. I think it's a sign that while the White House is publicly saying that the president hasn't lost any trust in Secretary Noem, that she is potentially in trouble, and that he has confidence in Tom Homan, believes that he can kind of set the stage there in Minneapolis and Minnesota better, and that he will report directly to President Trump. I mean, he doesn't put that in a Truth Social post unless there is something amiss. And by all accounts, there is, a lot of infighting in DHS between Noem and her ally, obviously Corey Lewandowski, Rodney Scott, Border Patrol and Tom Homan with Noem. So that bad blood is kind of playing out here in the midst of what I know the president probably realizes is something that they've got to clean up quickly.
Todd Lyons, too, was on the outs, and it looked like Rodney Scott was marginalized. Tom Homan's going to bring both those guys back in, and I think he's going to diminish the number of ICE and Border Patrol in the city. I'm very curious to see if the meetings with the mayor and governor will change the tone on both those, instead of continuing to say this is love and you have an obligation to shoot this and Anne Frank references. I wonder if we're going to see a change of tone.
Well, I mean, just in the conversations that both sides reflected on yesterday between the president and Governor Walz and the president and the Minneapolis mayor, I think that, both are saying that they're de-escalating the rhetoric, and I think that, that's probably a positive sign. Not only that, but then you start getting local and state police involved and local and state authorities allowing ICE to do their job with the protection that really arguably should have been a couple weeks already.
Hey, listen, Kristi Noem and Tom Homan weren't talking. Tom Homan was not getting a call back for months. And that's a problem, especially if you're alienating Tom Homan. Do you understand that you couldn't have anybody who is more in sync with the president than Tom Homan? And you do that in your own peril. You should understand basic office politics better than that. So here's Senator Ted Cruz on the need for change. Cut 9.
What I think the administration could do better is the tone with which they're describing this. That immediately when an incident like this happens, they come out guns blazing, that we took out a violent terrorist, hooray. And the problem is, particularly for someone not paying attention, if you're being told this is a mom of three and there's no indication, she's not waving an ISIS flag or doesn't have a suicide vest around her.
Yeah.
Escalating the rhetoric doesn't help, and it actually loses credibility.
So that's not usual for the senator to take on the administration and their policies, and I think it's in wake of the change. It gives people freedom to act. I'm wondering, Brett, do you think this leads to a shutdown? What does your gut tell you? What do your sources say?
Well, Democrats are heading that way because they see that this is a really political valuable moment for them. They've seen polls turn their way. They've seen independents shift dramatically against some of these ICE operations and believe that stirring this pot is a good thing. But as you talked about earlier, it's not really fruitful if that's what they're trying to do. If you're trying to deny ICE money, it is not this way because they've been funded largely, almost completely through 2029. So you take that money and you then affect TSA and somebody that can't get someplace because of airport backup, or FEMA and emergency funds in the wake of these snowstorms. I think that is potentially dangerous politically. But right now, Democrats are, sowing their oats. They feel like this is a valuable political moment.
So I'm looking at some of the polls, and the president's got reason to feel he's on the right side of this. 55%. When asked, "Are you for deporting all illegal criminals?" The New York Times poll, 55% yes. Marquette poll, 64% said yes. CBS, 57% said yes. And ABC, 56%. So it comes down to, if these polls, it's very rare to get polls over 50% like this. So let's say they're true, or they're trending true. It's all about the methods. And if Tom Homan offers the fresh start there, I think we could be on the right track, because Tom Homan said we got to go for the worst of the worst. And you'll put all the pressure on the people protecting illegal immigrants in sanctuary status, if that is indeed the case.
Yeah, I think that it's about painting the picture. It's about the tactics they use. It's about how they do it. Obviously, you're going to have these professional agitators and other protesters that are designed to kind of stir the pot in each one of these operations. But if you have local and state authorities helping separate that, maybe have protest areas that are away from the operation, all kinds of things that you can do. Number two is that you're right. When you talk specifically about criminals and getting them off the street, the polls are exponential. Guess what else is exponential? When you say, for people who have been here illegally but have been paying taxes or have been part of the community before 2020, if you provide them some way, some pathway, maybe you do the Dreamers, all of this stuff, it's starting to be a 70-30, 80-20 issue. And I don't know if the president's going to get there, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a long ball in the game before the midterms.
So, Brett, I'll tell you, the president has said on the air with us here that he is for finding a solution for people that have been there a couple of decades. Maybe it's a long-term work visa with a sponsorship. Maybe it's not rewarding with coming here illegally with citizenship. but maybe it's getting them acclimated into the system where you can get insurance and you can get scale pay and things to that nature. You no longer have to fear deportation. So that is something I hear you, and I think the president wants to do that. I think Stephen Miller, I think Kristi Noem, and who's ever telling Kristi Noem what to do are the ones pushing against that. The zero-sum game, I don't think is where the American people are at. Thanks so much. Hey, Brett, look forward to you tonight. See Special Report tonight at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Thanks, Brett.
And a shakeup on the ground in Minnesota. President Trump is deploying border czar Tom Homan there, while Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino is set to leave. The president posting in part this: "I am sending Tom Homan to Minnesota tonight. He has not been involved in that area, but knows and likes many of the people there. Tom is tough but fair and will report directly to me." And joining us now, DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin. Thanks for being here. So I understand Secretary Noem met with the president last night. And the president has signaled he wants a significant pivot in Minneapolis. How is the secretary prepared to help him fully make that pivot?
Yeah, absolutely, Dana. And I think the president and secretary, they've had at-length discussions. I can't get into those specifics, but Secretary Noem will continue to oversee, of course, the Department of Homeland Security, and she's very happy that Tom Homan, who is a great asset to the president, has a great depth of experience and insight, that he will be overseeing Minneapolis. Secretary Noem has also been overseeing FEMA. She's been living there for 3 days during this storm, as well as U.S. Coast Guard, TSA, Secret Service. So her portfolio is really huge, and she'll continue with CBP and ICE. We've arrested and deported over 700,000 criminal illegal aliens.
Yes, I want to get to that.
2.1 million self-deportations, and she'll continue with that work.
Okay, I do want to play one thing that happened on Saturday. This is at FEMA at a press conference there. Watch.
The White House has labeled the man who was killed in Minnesota as a domestic terrorist. Is that something you agree with? And have you seen any evidence to back up that claim?
When you perpetuate violence against a government because of ideological reasons and for reasons to resist and perpetuate violence, that is the definition of domestic terrorism. This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts.
Tricia, is the department and the secretary pulling back that label of domestic terrorist from the Alex Preddy situation?
Dana, in this situation, we have seen on the ground in Minneapolis a highly coordinated campaign of violence against our law enforcement. Your viewers have seen the images. And in this case, we saw an individual who he was armed. He got into a physical altercation with law enforcement. He was in the course of obstructing a federal operation, which is a federal crime. The Department of Homeland Security, we work every day to make sure we're giving the American people swift, accurate information, and so we'll continue to do that as facts are emerging, as things are evolving.
Then are you standing by calling him a domestic terrorist?
Well, we'll let this investigation that Homeland Security investigators are leading, the FBI is supporting, and CBP is doing a separate internal investigation as well, Dana.
Okay, so I guess it stands. Then let me ask you this. Then yesterday there was questions about body cam video during that incident, and have you, I know it's only been about 12 hours since that briefing, but do you have any updated information on whether the department will release that body cam video?
I don't have that information. I have not seen the body cam footage myself. I know that there's at least 4 officers who were on the ground during that incident where they were wearing body cams. So I imagine that will be released at some point, but I don't have more information on it. But I do want to say, Dana, that this is an absolute tragedy, and I pray every morning and every night for Alex Preddy and his family. This was completely preventable, and we never want to see a loss of life. And it is a reminder that when you do obstruct lawful operations, especially if you're armed, it's dangerous and it can be deadly. You have the right to practice your First Amendment, of course, and your Second Amendment rights, but do so responsibly and without breaking federal law.
Thank you for that. I want to ask you about this too, because I think the American people are frustrated in terms of all the different types of information. Nobody trusts anybody, etc. But it does seem like that all of us should be able to agree on numbers. And last week, you told our show that there were 1,300 illegal immigrants in Minnesota jails or Minneapolis jails. So Governor Walz, Tim Walz, he writes in the Wall Street Journal today that, I'm going to quote it here for you because I want you to respond to this and we can maybe figure out what's going on with the numbers. Some of the administration's claims are ridiculous on their face, he writes. And he says, for example, it claims that 1,360 non-U.S. citizens are in Minnesota prisons. The truth, our total state prison population is roughly 8,000, and only 207 of them are non-citizens. Is he conflating and splitting hairs at the same time of city and county jails along with state prisons? Is that how you understand it, and is that how you get to your number?
Yes, my understanding is he's being a little bit misleading here, or a lot misleading, by saying that those 1,360 criminal legal aliens are not sitting in the county and city jails, which is exactly where they are. We know that last year, under Walz's leadership, that those city and county jails released 470 criminal legal aliens. So again, what the president, what Secretary Noem have been asking for is that level of cooperation before they release a criminal legal alien onto the streets, to give us notification so that we can come and pick them up and they're not going back onto the street to re-perpetuate crimes against Americans. And secondly, when we are seeing rioters, we're seeing things spiral out of control, assaults, obstruction of law enforcement, which is a federal crime, as we've mentioned before, that those state and local governments and law enforcement are allowed to answer our calls for backup so no one gets hurt.
I know that also you put out a message yesterday, we won't play it here just for time, but there was an audio threat against ICE, and that you say that there are more than 8,000, that threats against officers have gone up 8,000%. Do you believe that with President Trump taking this action by sending Tom Homan to Minneapolis, that there will be a way to calm that down so that when ICE goes to other places, this will hopefully calm down?
Yes, I mean, I think that the president's conversation with Tim Walz yesterday sounded like it was encouraging. Again, all we're asking for is that state and local cooperation so that we can go into those jails and so that we can actually have the backup of law enforcement. That would, I think, really take down the temperature, which is what we need to see in Minneapolis in particular, but all over the country, so to make sure every American is safe.
Tricia McLaughlin, you are great to come on. Thank you so much. I know that a communicator's best work is usually never seen, but you're always willing to come on, and we thank you.
Do you agree with the assessment from some of your own officials that Alex Preddy is a domestic terrorist or an assassin?
Well, I haven't heard that, but certainly he shouldn't have been carrying a gun. But hey, look, bottom line, everybody in this room, we view that as a very unfortunate incident, okay? Right. Everyone, unless you're a stupid person. Very, very unfortunate incident. I don't like that he had a gun. I don't like that he had 2 fully loaded magazines. That's a lot of bad stuff. And despite that, I say that's a very unfortunate.
You said that you are the de facto president of Venezuela. I don't know, maybe you were joking when you said that. Is the U.S. a de facto member of OPEC right now?
Well, I'll tell you what, we are a very strong presence in Venezuela. We're going to get a lot of money for Venezuela. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, with the exception, I think, of our country. Yep. And it's bigger than Saudi Arabia. And we had a very strong moment with Venezuela a couple of weeks ago. And we are working beautifully with Venezuela. I will tell you, they're going to do better now than they ever did, than they've done ever at any point. And we're going to be making a lot of money for them and a lot of money for our country.
Meanwhile, Kayleigh McEnany here with us in studio, and good morning to you. Good morning. What now?
Well, what now is this? There is one duly elected president of the United States. There's one person who was the first Republican to win the popular vote in 20 years. That person was Donald J. Trump. It is a massive problem when the message being set by the person elected by the American people is lost. It's a massive problem when the direction of the president of the United States is lost. And that is precisely what has happened. On this weekend, President Trump spoke to the Wall Street Journal. We all know this. He declined to characterize the shooting of Alex Preddy. He said he is reviewing everything. But let's go back further than that. Let's go back to Tuesday. Tuesday, President Trump stood at the podium, said, "I felt terribly about the death of Renee Good. I understand both sides." He told his immigration folks, "You've got to lighten up on this." That was Tuesday. That was before Alex Preddy. Let's go back even further. Let's go back to January 11th. Donald Trump talks to the New York Times, and he tells the New York Times, "I want comprehensive immigration reform." They say a path to citizenship. He says possibly, possibly. He has been laying out the appropriate message 4 weeks now. He has sent a very direct action, lighten up. And when that order is not taken by the Department of Homeland Security, and when the messaging is done wrong not once but twice, the domestic terrorism, snapping to that conclusion right away, that's a problem. And President Trump has done the right thing by setting it straight, getting order, and I'm sure he's reiterated, I was the one who was elected, guys. I set the message.
Yeah, he had to take the reins. The First Lady talked to Fox and Friends earlier today about unity. Watch here.
We need to unify. I'm calling for unity. I know my husband, the president, had a great call yesterday with the governor and the mayor, and they're working together to make it peaceful and without riots. I'm against the violence, so please, if we protest in peace. And we need to unify in these times.
And sometimes it does take a First Lady to smooth things out.
And I could tell you from having been there, the First Lady is a huge voice in the president's ear. She often has the right gut on many of these issues and guides him, I think, in the right direction. It was spot on, the correct move to send Tom Homan, someone with 40 years experience, worked under both presidents, and has had the right message from the beginning. In the wake of Renee Good, CBS was pressing him on the domestic terrorism language, and he said it would be unprofessional to say something before an investigation. So he's someone with experience, someone with a long history of immigration enforcement, and the right man for the job.
You were there in Trump 1.0, and I think what he learned is that when he fired somebody on his team, he got a lot of blowback for it. And that lingered for a long time. And I think he's hesitant in 2.0 to go ahead and do that yet again. But what you laid out is that I gave you the direction. I told you how it should be, and it didn't happen that way. If that's the case, then is this the time for him to make his first significant change?
You know, that's a decision for him to make. But to that end, we know that the media likes to carry one narrative. I just listed for you all the things the president has said. Did any of those make headlines? Was it a headline news on CNN when he called for possibly a path to citizenship? No, the headline news was the more eccentric language, the harsher language of subordinates, not of the president. So to that end, if President Trump was to let someone go, it would carry every news cycle. It'd be spun in a negative way. I think he's doing the right thing. Empower Tom Homan. If he wants to make that decision, he can do it on his own timing. But doing it right now, you're just going to get a lot of headlines. The left-wing press is not going to allow that to be characterized.
Great stuff. We'll see you at noon on Outnumbered.
Thank you.
Let's bring in Paul Morrow, retired NYPD inspector, attorney, and Fox News contributor, Rosanna Scotto, anchor of Good Day New York on Fox 5 and host of The Sanctuary Trap on Fox Nation, and Jessica Tarlov, co-host of The Five. Great to have all of you with us. So, Jessica, let me start with you. How different do you think things will look now that, and I think, you know, the president deserves credit for saying, we have a problem here, we have to make a change.
He definitely was reading the tea leaves, or at least seeing the outcry after Alex Preddy was killed on Saturday, and I think acted appropriately and swiftly. And you're seeing that there's the appropriate reaction on the part of Governor Walz and Mayor Frey in Minneapolis, that they are prepared to work with someone who is not executing immigration policy in the way that Greg Bovino was doing it. So I'm hopeful for that. And you know, this battle between Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski and Stephen Miller versus Tom Homan and Rodney Scott, who is the commissioner of CBP, has been going on for months. And whatever you think about Tom Homan, he has served Republican and Democratic administrations in the past. He has made very clear in a number of interviews, including with the New York Times, that his focus is on the worst of the worst, which I think the average Trump voter was thinking was going to be the intention, not the, you know, the grannies with the mass deportations now signs. And I hope that President Trump sticks to his perspective from 24 hours ago. I saw he was speaking to reporters right before he got on Marine One and said, you can't have guns. You can't go in there with guns, talking about Alex Preddy. I know that the gun lobby, the NRA, gun groups have been very disturbed by the comments that have been made by the administration when it comes to the Second Amendment and Alex Preddy's right to have that weapon with him when he went out to protest. He has to be careful there. But the next big thing will be that Hakeem Jeffries has come out and said if Kristi Noem isn't out, that they are going to bring forward articles of impeachment. I don't think that Donald Trump wants that kind of scene, to have her up there through impeachment hearings. And my expectation would be that, you know, she's concerned about losing her job, to say the least.
So, Paul, one of the things that the president has promised here as part of this process is a thorough investigation. We heard him say that initially, and we're learning a lot more about this investigation. We have a little bit of the video that we had from Saturday that we can go ahead and roll, and then we've seen this from many angles at this point. And we also have images of Pretty's handgun, which you say we're learning was altered in some way. Can you explain to us what we're looking at here with this gun, Paul?
Right. So I'm no gunsmith, but you can see that there are additions as opposed to altered, let's say, because he's got that sight. You see that rectangular piece that's at the back? That is a sight so that you can aim the gun more accurately. That's something that you can add on. You can buy that. It's on the top, on the back. They have it open. That is to say that there's nothing chambered in the barrel, and so they have the slide open. That's why it looks the way it does. Also at the end, the threading, that looks like almost like a screw. That means that you can put a silencer, which is not illegal in Minnesota as long as you have the permit, which apparently he did. I would point out, however, that under Minnesota law, you have to have the permit and identification on you when you carry the gun.
And isn't it also true, I heard Joey Jones talking about this, that you also have to, if you're in a situation where law enforcement is present, you basically lose your gun permit, right? Correct? Temporarily, for those moments.
And yeah, you have to apprise them. Look, and that's just common sense. But
yes.
I think what it goes to is the larger issue of what the parameters of. Let's stick to the investigation here as opposed to the larger political aspects. What are they going to look at? First of all, we know he had his phone out. That is, Pretty did, right? You got to get that phone. You got to get into that phone. You got to see what it looked like from his perspective, what he saw. That's maybe the most germane video of all here. You also want to hear what he was saying. The audio matters as well. Were they talking to each other? Were there commands he couldn't hear because they were blowing all of those whistles? You also want to see, obviously, any other video that you can get. You want to see any messages that are on his phone. You want to make sure all the video in the area has been gathered. You have to do interviews because there are going to be people around there that you should have detained. There's a woman that was involved in the fracas. You got to make sure you talk to her, identify her. This is a lot of stuff you got to do. Then you got to synchronize it and come up with the full narrative. And, of course, you got to see if there's video from the officers. Most of ICE, my understanding, still doesn't have the body worn. They were rolling those out, but they don't have those. But you got to interview them all. Yep. And you got to see if anything is contradictory. That stuff takes time. And that's why the safest thing in retrospect is to say we're investigating.
Yeah, and that is exactly. The safest thing to say right out of the gate is that there's an ongoing investigation and that everything will be revealed as they are able to reveal it. Rather than jumping ahead of that. Roseanne, I want to play this. This is Hollywood movie star Ed Norton. Let's hear what he had to say as he's looking at this situation. Watch.
These are not normal times. We have, extrajudicial, assaults on Americans and humans going on a daily basis now, and it's not okay. What they're doing in Minnesota with the strike needs to expand. I think we should be talking about a national general economic strike until this is over.
So he wants to see nationwide protests, and we've heard, little bits and pieces, some things in New York, some things in Boston, and in D.C. Your reaction?
Well, listen, we know that the liberal actors and actresses from Hollywood, of course, they would be taking that position. And that's why we're in the situation that we're in right now. The messaging in Minnesota is completely convoluted. President Trump, he ran on a campaign of getting illegal immigrants who have criminal records out of this country. Somehow or another, now the people in Minnesota are saying, these are my neighbors, these are my brothers and sisters. So that criminal aspect has long been dissipated. It's not even part of the conversation or vernacular right now. Somehow we got to get back to basics, get back to what President Trump ran on, and the protests. Some of these people, agitators, some of them encouraged by the politicians and the actors and actresses out there, photograph everything, get in their face. I mean, if they would just listen to the law enforcement, when law enforcement says, yeah, you can protest, we have no problem with, but when I tell you to stop, stop. Yeah. And that has completely gone out the window.
But even the police chief, the Minnesota police chief, Minneapolis police chief, has said a number of times that the constitutional rights of Americans are being violated, including off-duty cops. And he said on top of it that the ones who are being stopped are people of color. There are videos of these officers asking with no warrant, no reasonable reason.
Well, I think that's exactly
searching,
what President Trump wants to. I think he wants to return to exactly what Roseanne is saying, to making sure that the focus is on violent criminal offenders, which I think most polls show, and the election of 2024 backs up that people do want these individuals removed. Very quickly, this is Jennifer Welsh. I just want to get a super quick thought from you on this, if I can. Jessica, let's watch.
Let me tell you something, Democratic Party. Your approval rating is 18% because you're weak and impotent and you don't believe in anything unless your position is abolish and prosecute. Get the out of the Democratic Party. Get the out and go join MAGA.
So Abolish ICE has a higher approval rating than it ever has before. It's up 20 points even from just over the summer, 46% approve, 41% oppose. We will see what happens with the DHS funding fight that's going to end this Friday. I think that Democratic leadership has heard people loud and clear that it's not about necessarily getting rid of law enforcement or immigration enforcement, but that we had 2 innocent people who should be here today that have been killed in the streets of Minneapolis, and that you have to respond accordingly. And President Trump knows how serious this is.
Well, those investigations are ongoing. And I think that's one of the biggest problems here, is that everyone jumped ahead and we don't know.
Wasn't going to happen.
Okay.
And they said that, and they had to be pushed into this too. Local law enforcement said that the feds weren't working with them, that they weren't opening up the crime scene to them.
The Fed said the same thing about local law enforcement, that they were not helping them at all.
Law enforcement doesn't even come when the Feds call
Exactly.
Let's remember
these problems are not happening in places where there is coordination between ICE and local law officials. So there's a lot of correction that needs to happen at the local level and at the federal level, which the president has talked about. And
Ken Cuccinelli, former acting DHS Deputy Secretary. Good to see you today in Focus. First of all, what should the very first thing that Tom Homan does when he puts his feet on the ground in the Twin Cities, what should that first step be?
Well, the first step should be to reassure the agents that are there that the administration has their back. When you lead troops under fire, and in this case, law enforcement under a lot of pressure, they need to know that you're going to have their back. That doesn't mean they have free rein to do anything, but it does mean that you're not going to back down from protecting them. And the second thing he ought to do is to really push on this point of cooperation regarding turning over criminal aliens. Governor Walz said, oh, we've been doing that. And we all know that's not true.
Yeah.
So words are not going to be the final arbiter there. It's going to be the actions in Minnesota that Tom Homan is going to elicit. But he's the perfect guy for this job.
Boy, I don't even know what you say to somebody like a Mayor Jacob Frey, who called things murder before he had even seen anything, before the nation had even really known details. I mean, that's problematic no matter what, because those words will never go away no matter what is said at this point. But I want to get to this. DHS explicitly laying out just what ICE agents are up against. The department posted this: anti-ICE agitators are threatening the families of our law enforcement. We will hunt these sickos down and put them behind bars. ICE officers are facing a more than 8,000% increase in death threats against them. And one horrific receipt is linked in this post, a voicemail. Listen.
You're a fucking fascist pig. You should fucking kill yourself. I hope your wife dies. I hope your mom and dad die. I hope everything wrong that could go in your life happens. You should kill yourself. You're fucking disgusting. I hate you. Everyone hates you. You're a fucking murderer, and all of your friends are fucking murderers.
Your reaction to that?
Well, Harris, I hear a lot of things in there. First of all, I hear a really demented person. Second of all, I hear sort of in voice the embodiment of the hate that's been being stirred up by Mayor Frey, Governor Walz, and and Governor Newsom, and so many others on the left. They want this violence. They want this chaos. This is not an accident for them. This is the desired outcome. and they're getting it, and it is tragic for many people, and it's threatening to ICE officers. I will tell you a major difference with this administration from even when I was at the Department of Homeland Security in the first Trump administration is the support of the Department of Justice. The aggressive support of the Department of Justice to go after the stalkers of ICE agents' families makes an enormous difference in those agents' ability to, one, to do their job and fulfill their mission, but also to go home safely every night. And that is absolutely critical to the administration pursuing and achieving its goals.
Well, and what you're talking
Big
about
difference.
is something that Tom Homan has mentioned on this very program. He shared recently that there were threats against him, his wife. He didn't go into detail about his family, and that's a blessing because you don't want to give people more than what they deserve to know. But that is worth knowing. The man who's going to lead now, President Obama sent him in on this mission previously. He is somebody who has received an award from that president.
That's right.
While the politics are toxic, Tom Homan is the right guy to send in. President Trump is making this move now, and it is right on time. What do you say about it?
He's got over 30 years of law enforcement operational experience at every level. He's no diplomat. But he's a firm communicator of the president's policies. I think he's the perfect person to bring about both a de-escalation and success of the ICE mission, both of those things at the same time. And as you noted, Harris, for a year, he's been doing this at his own personal risk. So he continues to be a hero for the American people.
Well, I want to get to this, more backlash over this. We reported yesterday on a shameful comparison by Governor Walz. Important to note, today is Holocaust Remembrance Day. Just take this in.
We have got children in Minnesota hiding in their houses, afraid to go outside. Many of us grew up reading that story of Anne Frank. Somebody's going to write that children's story about Minnesota.
Disgusting. I lived in that state. He's a mockery.
It is disgusting.
The Holocaust Museum had a scathing response. Quote, Anne Frank was targeted and murdered solely because she was Jewish. Leaders making false equivalencies to her experience for political purposes is never accepted. Despite tensions in Minneapolis, exploiting the Holocaust is deeply offensive, especially as anti-Semitism surges. And surge it has, in fact. The Anti-Defamation League reported a record number of anti-Semitic incidents in this country in 2024. You know we've been covering it, more than 9,000 of them. Now he's mixed in some other problems, the governor. Such a knack to make it messy and dangerous.
Well, again, his goal is this chaos. It's hard for regular people who are watching and listening to you and me, Harris, to understand this. He wants the chaos. He thinks it hurts Trump more than it hurts Governor Walz. And so they know that people are going to get hurt, maybe even die. They are okay with that. That's how far they'll go in their political virtue signaling. They are willing to risk and sacrifice the people who are there encouraging to come out and obstruct law enforcement. I'm not going to call it protesting. It's protesting when you do it in one place. It's obstruction when you're stalking law enforcement to impede their operations. And that's what Governor Walz and Mayor Frey want. It's what they're getting, and people are getting hurt and, in fact, dying because they're entering into confrontations with law enforcement that put law enforcement at risk.
Well, we have a new sheriff in town. President Trump has put somebody on the ground now with Tom Homan who's going to be able to make a big difference, as you've told us today. Ken Cuccinelli, always great to have you on the program. Thank you.
Good to be with you, Harris.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.
Congressman, good to have you on. You've got an op-ed in the New York Times today titled, "We Need to Wake Up After Minneapolis." In part, you say, quote, "The deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minneapolis this month were tragic and preventable. No matter where you stand on immigration enforcement, the shootings show that what the country has been doing is not working. Americans do not want chaos. They want a common-sense, bipartisan solution." So we turn to you to say and ask, what is that solution?
Well, thanks for having me, John. I think the American people were rightly frustrated during the Biden years when Joe Biden allowed open borders and allowed over 10.5 million migrants to flood into the country. President Trump said he would do something about it, and he has. He has effectively stopped illegal border entries into the country, net zero border crossings over the last 9 straight months. He has also won the argument when it comes to deporting criminal aliens. Most Americans agree with that. Where I think most Americans also agree is that if you have been in this country 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you've been working, you've not committed crimes, you have children or grandchildren that are American citizens. We want a legal path forward, not citizenship, not amnesty, but a legal process forward that those people can come out of the shadows and go through. The reality is we're not going to be able to round everybody up and kick them out. And what you see in sanctuary cities like Minneapolis, where they have refused to cooperate with immigration and customs officials, you see chaos, you see lawlessness, you see these types of protests that are spiraling. We don't want that. And I think it was a good sign yesterday that the president and the governor finally spoke, and that you saw last night Minneapolis police were assisting ICE with respect to crowd control. That should have happened from the start. That's why these incidents were preventable. You never should have had the public interfering with ICE operations. Though they are allowed to protest, they never should have been in those quarters to be able to interfere with. And so there's a lot that has to change tactically, but I think one of the things that is important is that we have to actually solve the crisis. The president has effectively addressed the border and is taking care of those that have committed crimes. But there's a larger issue that's been broken for 40 years. We have not had immigration reform since 1986.
Yeah, sure. Well, I know what happened to the Gang of 6 there was a Gang of 8 in 2014, 2015. That didn't go very far. But you're really kind of talking about two things here. There's this idea of a legal path forward for people who've been in the country for years and years and years. But how would reforming that affect what we're seeing in Minneapolis?
Well, look, the administration has rightly deported over 675,000 people in year one. You've had about 1.9 million self-deportations. A lot of this tied to the people that came during the Biden years, when Joe Biden allowed over 10.5 million people into the country, and they flooded our cities and overwhelmed the social safety net. You saw it in New York. It was crippling the city. That is one aspect of this, but there are people that have been here a very long time, rightly or wrongly, and you have families that have been, together. You have children, grandchildren who are American citizens. You have to have a process here to finally, once and for all, solve this issue of the undocumented in the country. You're talking about not just the 10.5 million, you're talking about 25 million. And you're not going to be able to round them all up and kick them out. And so the question is, how do you deal with this comprehensively to secure the border? We do not want illegal immigration coming into the country anymore. The American people have made that clear. We don't want criminal aliens in the country. If you commit a crime, you're out. But you have to have a process forward. And I think if we're not willing to tackle this issue, frankly, when President Trump is gone, who knows what the next administration will do? You have to actually find consensus. I think it's important that we actually ratify President Trump's border policies as part of this. And I think it's also critically important, as the president has outlined, we need to end sanctuary city policies. It is destructive and is undermining our immigration policy nationwide.
Yeah, well, I think you'll find agreement from a lot of people on that last point. Congressman, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Welcome back to the Will Cain Show, live from Iowa, and now we're here. We're here with President Donald J. Trump. Mr. President, great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for doing this.
Well, you do have great ratings.
Well, thank you.
We check the ratings, but even if you had lousy ratings, I would do your show. You are terrific. You've been a terrific guy.
I anticipate they should do very well today with this type of guest today here on the Will Cain Show. Welcome back to the campaign trail. Welcome back to Iowa. How does it feel?
Well, I love Iowa. We've won it 3 times conclusively. There wasn't like any late night voting or anything. We just won it right at the beginning. The doors closed and they said Trump won. And I love the people. I just get along with the people.
I was watching the other room. You look back in your element. You're back with the people. What do you like better? Do you like this standing on the stage at a rally, or do you like making a deal, maybe for Greenland?
I think I like maybe the rallies better. Deals are fun, but we're making a lot of good deals. We've made record-setting deals. We have $18 trillion coming into the country. That's why they're building auto plants, AI. They're building everything. With thousands of businesses are being built all over the country. And you're going to have a beautiful, very positive explosion sometime during the year when these things start opening up. But there's never been no country has done what we've done.
That explosion, that anticipated economic explosion, that's going to be important because you also need to do something that someone has done very rarely. You acknowledged this a couple of days ago with Maria Bartiromo, and that is for the president in power to win the midterms. I think it's been only twice since 1938 that the sitting president, the president in power, has won the midterms. Are you concerned?
Well, nobody can explain why. You know, even when we've had an amazing year, there's been a record-setting year in every way, and nobody can explain. Even presidents, whether it's Republican or Democrat, when they win, it doesn't make any difference. They seem to lose the midterm. So that's the only thing I worry about. I said, why? There's some psychological factor out there.
What do you think that is?
But I think it's like 2 in more than 50 years. Well, I don't know. Maybe they want to put up a guard fence. Maybe you just don't know. It doesn't make sense. Even if a president did well, they seem to lose the midterms, but hopefully we're going to change that around. We're doing great. We have the best polling numbers we've ever had. We have the best numbers in the country, lowest crime numbers in the history of our country. You know, Minnesota's in the news a lot, but what they don't say is that Minnesota has low numbers because of the fact that we took thousands of hardened criminals out of Minnesota. So they had good crime numbers, believe it or not. And that's all working out. You know, we have Tom Homan there now. We put him in there. He's great. And they met with the governor, the mayor, everybody else, and we're going to de-escalate a little bit. But I will tell you, you look at the numbers, they're doing better than they've done in many years because we took thousands of criminals out of Minnesota. You look at Washington, D.C., it was a very dangerous place a year and a half ago. Now it's as safe as you can get. You can walk your family down the middle of the street, nothing's going to happen. You know, we got rid of over 2,000 hardened criminals, many of them led in through the open border policy of Sleepy Joe Biden. It was not a good policy, Will.
I want to come back to Minnesota in just one moment, but let's go to those guardrails. I'd imagine you do not feel like you need guardrails in this moment. You talk about the investment.
No, I don't need guardrails. I don't want guardrails. Guardrails would hurt us because, you know, we're free enterprise people. The people in this room, the people of Iowa, are free enterprise. That's why we won it so big 3 times in a row.
I would have to imagine that guardrails would be an understatement of what would happen should you lose the House or the Senate. There's been talk of impeachment. You've been through this before.
Yeah.
You've been through it multiple times.
I'm a professional.
What will happen? What will happen if Democrats take the House or the Senate?
They'll probably try and impeach me. They'll say he went to Iowa and he spoke unfairly to people and he's not supposed to do that. Let's impeach him, okay? And the people in Iowa would say, how did he get impeached? He just did an interview with Will, who has very good ratings, okay? But they just did an interview with Will. Now, they'll find something. There'll be something. I made the wrong turn at an exit, and let's impeach him. No, they did that before. They impeached me on a perfect phone call. Turned out they impeached me twice. And by the way, I won the impeachments very easily and quickly. But they impeached. They're very nasty people. You know, they have bad policy, really bad, but they do 2 things. They stick together, not stupid. Some are, because, you know, that's true with everything, right? But they stick together, but they have really bad policy. Men and women's sports, transgender for everybody. So many things are so bad. They're horrible to the farmers. And by the way, I just gave the farmers $12 billion because they were treated unfairly. We're taking in a fortune with tariffs. And I wrote them a little check about 2 weeks ago for $12 billion. Anybody in this room get any of it yet? Yes, yeah, a lot of people. It's a lot of money. And you know what? You deserved it. But we're taking in so much money from the tariffs that we can do that.
I want to talk about the point of view from some of these farmers, some of these people in this room a little bit later, but now I want to take you up on your invitation to talk about Minnesota. Listen, the entire country is talking about what happened this past weekend in Minnesota. You've already spoken about it. Everyone watching has seen the video. Everyone has an opinion. I'm curious what you thought when you first saw that video.
Well, I think the whole thing is terrible. I don't like the fact that he was carrying a gun that was fully loaded and he had 2 magazines with him, and it's pretty unusual. But nobody knows when they saw the gun, how they saw the gun, everything else. Bottom line, it was terrible. Both of them were terrible. The other was terrible, too. And I'm not sure about his parents, but I know her parents were big Trump fans. Makes me feel bad anyway. But, I mean, I guess you could say even worse. They were tremendous Trump people, Trump fans. And, you know, the daughter was, she was, I don't know if you could say radicalized, maybe not. I don't know. But I hate to see it. I hate to see that.
You bring up the term radicalized. What do you think is happening? You see these people in these videos, they feel very emboldened to step in and interfere with law enforcement.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about protest, holding signs. I'm talking about people physically interfering with immigration enforcement. Why? Why do they feel so emboldened?
You know, you have to go throughout the whole country. You know, we have done so much work throughout the whole country. We don't have any problem. The only one we have is Minnesota. We're in a lot of different places. New Orleans, we're in the governor of Louisiana called they have a big problem in New Orleans. And we went there. We've cut the crime by 67% in 4 weeks. It'll be down to practically nothing soon. Washington, D.C., we don't have problems. Like, you know, we've cut it down from a lot. It was very bad. It was terrible. People go to Washington to look at the Lincoln Monument, and they end up getting whacked or whatever, killed in some cases. Numerous killings. That's a beautiful, safe place now. Memphis, Tennessee, one of the worst in the whole country. And now it's got very little crime.
But it's gone very differently in Minneapolis.
Well, it has. It's the only place.
And now the message is out that Tom Homan is in.
Yeah.
Commander Bovino is supposedly leaving Minneapolis along with some CBP agents. Is this a pullback?
I don't think it's a pullback. It's a little bit of a change. Everybody in this room that has a business, you know, you make little changes. You know, Bovino is very good, but he's a pretty out there kind of a guy. And in some cases, that's good. Maybe it wasn't good here. But you have to understand, when I watch some of the people that I've been watching over the last few weeks, these are paid insurrectionists. These are paid agitators. These people aren't normal, like, oh, gee, that, you know, they're incensed about anything. How do you get incensed when you go into a state and you're taking criminals out? You're taking monsters out, murderers. You know, we had 11,888 murderers let into our country by other countries, by Biden, with his open border stupid policy. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You talk about bad policy. Open borders where people were coming, so the whole world, the Congo, Venezuela, all over the world, they're letting people in from their prisons and they're feeding them into the United States. And they're murderers and they're drug dealers and they're everything else you can think of, every bad name you can think of. And they let them in by the millions. We closed the border. You know, we have nobody coming into our country anymore. Literally.
It just shows how hard it is to clean up, even after you close it. It shows the price that we paid under Joe Biden.
It's the hardest thing when you think of it. You know, inflation we've solved. It's done. We have it good. Where prices are coming way down. They were just saying in Iowa, the fuel is $1.95. Did you hear that? Somebody said $1.85, but it was $3.50, $4.50 just a year ago, a year and a half ago. You look at eggs, you look at groceries, it's all down. Everything's come down. Do you notice they don't mention affordability anymore? That's like an old-fashioned word. They brought up affordability, but they were the ones that caused it. I didn't cause it. I came in, prices were way too high. We had the highest inflation in the history of our country. 48 years, they say. I say the history. But we had the highest, let's say in 48 years, the highest inflation. Prices were way high. Now I've got the prices down, and they're going down still further. But think of it. We brought fuel from $4, $3.50, $3.75 down to $1.99, $1.08. I was just told in Iowa $1.85.
Yeah.
A gallon.
No doubt. No doubt. But that leaves that problem, like you said, the hardest one to solve. People say they want our immigration laws enforced.
The hardest one to solve is.
You know, I remember a conversation that you and I had a year and a half ago with your Secretary of War, our friend Rachel Campos Duffy, and you said to me, you looked at me and said, it's going to be difficult when the New York Times runs a picture of a little kid being taken away from their mother. It's going to be difficult. And by the way, that basically happened to you a week ago. It was propaganda and it was false about a 5-year-old.
By the way, it was a totally false story
totally
about the 5-year-old.
Fake story.
Yeah,
But you're now dealing with the difficulty of the propaganda in the face of enforcing
and I knew
illegal
that, Will.
immigration.
I mean, I
you
said
did know.
It's always tough.
Are you still
So we
committed?
take out 25 murderers. We take out drug dealers. We take out a whole group of people by the thousands. And if we get one person a little bit wrong, headlines. But they don't talk about all the tremendous, you know, the reason that we have Minnesota crime down. I talk about that because it's only down for one reason. We took out so many criminals. But other states are way down. So the report came out there. Think of it. In the history of this country, we have the lowest number of murders. We have the lowest crime, the best crime numbers. That's despite the fact that millions, I say 25 million people, millions of people were let in through the border by Biden, and many of those people were not people you want to have in the country.
So what's going to change? You put in Tom Homan. Have you spoken today to Tom Homan?
Well, yeah, I have. Tom is fantastic. Tom is a tough guy, but I've watched over the years, and he's gotten along with governors, and he gets along with mayors. Some people don't. Some people just want to do their job and leave me alone. And that's sort of okay, too. That's generally been okay. Most of them are happy. Memphis, Tennessee, very tough, very straightforward. We're taking the criminal out. We're getting them out, either putting them in jail, because some are so bad that you don't want to send them to where they came from because you're afraid they're going to come back. They're murderers. So some are very down and straight, and others, Tom, I've noticed, as tough as he is, he gets along very good with governors and mayors. Now, I spoke to the mayor and to the governor yesterday, and they want to see it cleared up.
I'm so fascinated by your conversation with Governor Tim Walz. This man has suggested that this is a modern-day Gettysburg. He has likened his situation to Anne Frank in the Holocaust. He has said that ICE is your Gestapo army. And then you guys speak on the phone. I'm fascinated by that conversation.
It couldn't have been a nicer conversation. And in fact, I said to my people, I said, it's hard to believe that's the same guy I watch on television, or I watch in a debate not doing so well, or because we had a very reasonable conversation, very good conversation. If you believe the conversation, he'd like to get this thing over with. But think of it, in the whole country, we've done this so much. We have the crime down to a level that nobody ever, I campaigned a little bit on crime, a lot on the border. The problem is I gave you the best border in the history of our country. Nobody wants to talk about it anymore. I did it a long time ago. I was able to do it within 3 months of taking office. I had that border locked and closed. And, nobody even tries to come up anymore. It's easy now. Nobody even tries to come up. Before they were coming up by the millions. But nobody wants to talk about that. They only want to talk about whatever the last thing is. But we're taking out thousands and thousands of criminals. And the worst thing that Biden did to this country, because, again, inflation I can solve, all this stuff. The hardest thing to solve is when you have people brought into the country and you have to take those people. We have a very unfriendly court system, frankly, especially at the lower levels. Take those people and you have to say, I'm sorry, but you're going out. And in many cases, they're murderers. And, they shoot you. They kill you. You've seen that, where they kill you. You're after a murderer. Sir, you're going to have to come with me, and they end up shooting you. It's a very tough job that they have.
I know you addressed this morning. You talked about the incredible success, and it is an incredible success at the southern border. But you were asked, with the shift in Minneapolis and Tom Homan going to Minnesota, do you still have confidence in DHS Secretary Kristi Noem? You brought up the success at the border.
Look,
you do.
She was there with the border. Who closed up the border? She did, with Tom Homan, with the whole group. I mean, they closed up the border. The border is a tremendous success, one of the most secure borders in the entire world. We were a laughingstock 1.5 years ago for the whole world. The whole world laughed at us. I had friends that said, is that real? They'd look at a picture. You've been down to the border. They'd look at a picture of the border with hundreds of thousands of people pouring in like it was water. And they said, is that really taken? They can't believe it. They think it's one of these crazy movies that they make. The border was horrible. It was horrible. I did the border twice. First time I won, 2016, I won on the border. But that border was nothing, and I fixed it immediately. It was great. We had great years, and we had a great economy. We had the best economy in history in 2016, my first term. And we rebuilt the military, and we get the largest regulation cuts. We had the best job number. We had a great first term. This term seems to be blowing it away. I mean, the only thing we have is a Minnesota situation, and that is, I believe, easily resolved.
Okay. You're about to take the stage here in Iowa. I imagine you're going to talk about the economy.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your plan is if the Supreme Court rules negatively on your tariffs. You talk about the tariffs
We'll have to find another way. Look,
is there a plan B?
Yeah, the tariffs have been indispensable towards success. We've taken in $600 billion in tariffs. I gave the farmers $12 billion last week. I took them out of tariff money. It's kept the unfair competition out of our country. Now, they can build their auto plant here, but they can't build a plant in some place with, labor costs for a penny and then sell it into this country and then charge people a lot of money for a car. So the only way they can do that, they have to build the plants here. So the big auto companies from Germany, from Mexico, from Canada, Mexico and Canada are literally, their plants are closing down. They're moving into this country. So we have more activity than we've ever had. We have thousands of businesses all over the country being built. We have hundreds of big major factories between AI, autos, and many other things being built. We've never had a thing like this.
And you use them as a tool for world peace.
For world peace, yeah. We have to use it for world peace.
But what happens if the Supreme Court strikes down the tariffs?
We will find something, some other way of doing a similar thing.
You know,
but it'll be more inconvenient. It
I
won't
was just
be as
speaking
easy.
to some of the diners here today. Right. David Ullman, he's lived in Iowa for a long time. He's in agriculture. He does express concern about the tariffs and the effect it's had on farmers in Iowa.
Well, it's going to be just don't forget, they just kicked in. And it's going to, and we've taken in hundreds of billions of dollars. And we've kept a lot of people out that want to come in and rip off for years, it was in the reverse. China would charge us tariffs. Other countries would charge us tariffs. I've totally reversed it. Japan gave us $550 billion. South Korea is supposed to give us $350 billion. But what happens is they're coming in, they're building plants, they don't have to pay tariffs. If they don't do that, so what's happening is we're getting a tremendous amount of business coming to this country, and they're coming in fast and sharp. I think the farmers are going to be the biggest beneficiary, because when you used to have people coming in and dumping their crops into the United States, and you guys were hurt, they're not allowed to do that because we're tariffing those crops.
Just a couple more questions.
I think the farmers, in a way, and it's going to take a little while to kick in, and the farmers stuck with me the first time, and I was right, with China, when China did a little bit of a number. We gave you $28 billion then, because it was a help because they were taken advantage of for years. We gave them 28. Now we gave them 12, sort of a minimal payment, $12 billion for the farmers. Nobody else would be able to do that. Nobody else would even think of doing that. But the tariffs are going to be phenomenal for the farmers, but they just kicked in.
I just see some nods here as you're talking.
A lot of nodding.
A couple of more questions. A couple of quick more questions, Mr. President. One serious one. This whole Minnesota thing, it started because of a focus on fraud. It started because of illegal immigration and welfare fraud. Yeah. The question is, will there be accountability in Minnesota and beyond?
There's got to be. Well,
other states, California.
Minnesota is one state. If you look at California, so in Minnesota they think it's $19 billion. If they think it's $19 billion, triple it or quadruple it. And if we catch a lot of this fraud, and I felt it for a long time, but now we know what's happening. And the answer is, yeah, there will be accountability. It's one of the little problems. You know, I happen to think, and I've said it from the beginning, that a lot of what's going on with respect to Minneapolis, you know, with what's happening with all the hoopla, is so people don't talk about.
You think it's a distraction?
I've said it from day one. It's a distraction, because what you don't see is that we have hundreds of accountants from Todd and from all of the different people. We have hundreds of accountants going over everything that's happening, and we're finding fraud on top of fraud on top of fraud. And I think that they don't want that to happen. You're talking about $19 billion. Probably that's a minimal number. Now, you take that and you go to California. You think California is better? I would say California is worse. It's totally out of control. They don't know what they're doing out there. The governor is, I actually thought he was a pretty nice guy, but he has no clue what he's doing. Look at a railroad. He builds a railroad. It's like 20 times more expensive than it was supposed to be. And what they did to get down the cost, they made it shorter, so it doesn't go to San Francisco.
You saw what he said, right? He's claiming victory in Minnesota, by the way. He has posted that you have retreated in Minnesota, Governor Gavin Newsom, and he is encouraging people to keep the pressure up.
See, I haven't heard that at all, because it's just the opposite. I was called by the governor yesterday. I was called by the mayor yesterday. How do we do something? Please, how do we do something? I think it's bad for them. I don't think it's bad for us. I think it's bad for them.
Yeah, you'll have to see what Governor
But it's not
Newsom
a question
posted.
of retreat. We want safe cities. Whether it's if we took a lot of the crime out of there. We want safe cities and states. We want a safe country. And again, we just got a report done by Democrats that the country is the safest ever recorded right now.
Right, along with a secure border. I'm just looking around. You know, who's here today? There's a lot of people. But one guy who is not here is your Secretary of State, and I'm afraid he made a very big mistake. He gave an interview where he said that one of his tricks with you is on Air Force One. Marco Rubio goes into a room and covers himself up with blankets so that you won't see him sleeping, that you'll think it's a staffer. And so I think there's only one of two ways you go with this. You give him yet another job, or you pull the blankets back.
That's what he wants. Let me tell you, he's doing a fantastic job. He's a tough cookie. I can tell you that. He's a tough cookie. He's going to go down as the best Secretary of State we've ever had. You see what we're doing. Just today we solved a tremendous problem in conjunction with Syria, saved many lives. Right. I mean, we're saving a lot of lives all over the world. Ended 8 wars. I'm very proud of that because it's not tough for me. We're trying to end one more, by the way, Russia, Ukraine. And I think we're going to get that done, too. But we ended 8 wars and saved tens of millions of lives, and I'm happy about that.
You should be proud.
Thank you.
I know you're a big sports fan, so we'll end here. We now have the Super Bowl set. New England Patriots, Seattle Seahawks. Now, usually when someone asks you these questions, you answer with, which of these two teams have a greater affiliation and fandom of President Donald Trump?
That's true. In those
so
cases...
I'm curious, have you already done the analysis?
Well, I tell you what, no, but
who's going to win the Super Bowl?
Yeah, Bob Kraft is a friend of mine, and I've watched that team. You know, you got to hand it to him. He had the great team, and now he's got the great team again. They made a fantastic draft pick. The quarterback is great. But it's going to be I think it's going to be a tremendous game. I hope it's going to be a tremendous game.
Yeah. Mr. President, I know you got to take the stage. I really appreciate all the time you've given us and joining us live. We called a lot of audibles right here at the last moment. We really appreciate you joining us.
Well, you've done a tremendous job, and you've really been very fair to me. I don't even say nice. I just want to be fair, and you've been fair, and you've also been nice. And so it was an honor to do it. When I heard it was you, I said, let's do it.
All right. My goal is to tell the truth, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Will, very much. Thank you.
Thank you to the President of the United States.
Continue. Federal investigators are digging into who is funding them. FBI Director Kash Patel says they have tracked down people responsible and that the Bureau could soon take action.
You do not get to touch law enforcement. And we've got also investigations ongoing into the funding of this. We've made actual substantial progress. I just can't publicize it yet. But we've actually found groups and individuals responsible for funding it because it's not happening organically.
All right, let's bring in John Yoo, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, UC Berkeley Law Professor, and former Justice Clerk to former Justice Thomas. Again, the way they wrote this, it's former law clerk to Justice Clarence Thomas. There we go. Thanks. Got it out. So, John, what's your reaction to all of this appearing to be well organized?
I think one important thing that's come out of this recent shooting is that President Trump and the administration have signaled a desire to de-escalate things on the enforcement side, but it's got to be matched by a de-escalation of the tactics and attacks on federal law enforcement that have been occurring. And if there is some kind of organized money, organized entities behind these protests that are trying to ratchet up violence in the areas where the federal government is trying to enforce the law, then I think the FBI is justified to carry out an investigation and try to break those groups up. The bottom line consequence of this shooting cannot be that federal law enforcement doesn't get to enforce valid constitutional federal law. It has to be the case that federal law under the Constitution is always supreme, and that you have to have perhaps better ways to think about how to enforce the law. But it can't be the case that organized groups can just decide to attack federal law enforcement and bring the supremacy of federal law to a halt in parts of our country.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the organization, Pam Bondi visited Minneapolis recently. Here's what she said in observation.
I can tell you what I observed when I was there. It's extremely organized. The signs they have are all matching. They're well written. And look at what's happening today. How did these people go out and get gas masks? It's organized. They're out there to cause problems, and they're out there to hinder the great men and women in law enforcement.
You know, it's one thing to have a big protest march like we see so many of here in Washington, D.C. It's quite another, it would seem, especially according to administration officials, to hold protests that are designed to interfere with law enforcement operations.
Exactly, John. Of course, the First Amendment protects the right for peaceful protest for citizens to make their views known about government policy. That's why we have a First Amendment. But you can't go beyond what the lines are. What I think you see on videos coming out of Minneapolis, where you see people trying to block federal officers from entering and exiting federal facilities, where you see people harassing federal officers, where you see them trying to stop the officers from moving and carrying out their duties. That's not protected by the First Amendment. And if you do have groups funding that, coordinating that, they are committing a federal crime. They are committing obstruction of federal law enforcement, and they should be investigated and prosecuted just as much as any federal officer who might have used force beyond the Fourth Amendment rules should also be investigated.
Yeah, I've got a couple of screenshots of information that was obtained by Fox News Digital of the so-called rapid response teams in Minneapolis actively collecting information on ICE whereabouts, telegraphing it to protesters, asking people to come and back them up, including outside the donut shop. Let's put up the second screen here, including outside of the donut shop, where Alex Preddy got involved in trying to film or take video of the Border Patrol arrest that was going down and ended up dead. I mean, you can see backup needed at Black Forest Inn parking lot on Nicollet Avenue. Urgent. Observers urgently requested at Glam Doll Donuts. That's where the Preddy incident went down. Observer has been shot by ICE, unknown condition. EMTs present, please be safe. I mean, they're calling for people to actively get out there. And if you, in protest or in trying to interfere or take video or whatever, law enforcement operation as it's ongoing, knowing how chaotic they can be, you try to get in the middle of that, sometimes there are horrible consequences.
We should always decry the loss of human life. We don't want there to be situations like the ones we saw in Minneapolis. But all the blame is going right now to federal law enforcement officers who are carrying out their legal duties. And part of the responsibility lies with these groups, which are conspiring, I think, to obstruct federal law enforcement. That is a crime. They are contributing to, I think, unfortunately, the rise in violence you're seeing in Minneapolis. And it's illegal. It can't, I don't think that what the Trump administration should do is pull back and let the message be sent out that this kind of conspiring, that this kind of use of funds, this kind of obstruction of federal law enforcement is going to succeed, because it then undermines federal law throughout the whole country.
All right, John, always good to catch up with you and get your thoughts on things. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, guess who's back? Yes, former President Joe Biden is adding his 2 cents about Minnesota. In a post on X, he accused the Trump administration of, quote, targeting American citizens. No single person can destroy what America stands for and believes in, not even a president, if we, all of America, stand up and speak out. So that comes as President Trump reshuffles his deck in Minneapolis. Greg Bovino is out. Tom Homan is in, meeting with Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey. President Trump also voicing his support for DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, telling reporters she will not be stepping down from her role. And here's Trump talking to Will Cain about everything that's going on in Minneapolis.
We're going to de-escalate a little bit. We have Tom Homan there now. We put him in there. He's great. I don't think it's a pullback. It's a little bit of a change. Everybody in this room that has a business, you make little changes. Bovino's very good, but he's a pretty out there kind of a guy, and in some cases that's good. Maybe it wasn't good here. Tom, I've noticed, as tough as he is, he gets along very good with governors and mayors. Now, I spoke to the mayor and to the governor yesterday, and they want to see it cleared up. Couldn't have been a nicer conversation. And in fact, I said to my people, I said, it's hard to believe that's the same guy I watch on television, or I watch in a debate not doing so well, or because we had a very reasonable conversation, very good conversation.
So as you can see, President Trump trying to bring down the temperature, but will these Democrats listen?
This ICE should be crushed. Noem, gone. Homan, gone. Miller, gone. Masks off. Identification out. And law-abiding people no longer terrorized.
I was the person locking and unlocking doors at a supermercado in order to make sure that ICE wasn't entering the facilities.
Well, there's no way in hell that Senate Democrats can support this administration's agenda. Senate Democrats should not lift one finger to help advance the Trump agenda.
One of the tells about the conversation having gone well last night, Jesse, is that after President Trump talked to Walz and Frey, suddenly, as if by magic, the police, local police, were there helping and arresting violent agitators.
Yeah, I liked how Trump was like, man, Walz doesn't seem like such a doofus. The guy we watched melt down with Vance. So there was a deal, and we had Bovino and the Border Patrol boys in town to give ICE backup, to do crowd control, because the locals wouldn't help them since it's a sanctuary city. And so the deal is, after the mayhem on Saturday, we're going to send Bovino and Border Patrol back to the desert where they're trained to be, not doing crowd control in urban environments. if you guys cooperate and coordinate with ICE, give us the intel, and hand over the bad hombres that have been charged criminally. And Walz said he would, but there's two problems. Walz's base is pissed because Walz's base is like, wait a second, we're going to be working with ICE, the Nazis, the Gestapo. You had a phone call with the dictator, and the deal is that ICE stays and gets the criminals out? They don't even want the criminals out. They want everyone to stay, no matter if you've raped, murdered, or pillaged. Now, Trump's base is also happy that he finessed the drama, but if we're just targeting people with criminal records, that's fine, but that's not enough. We want everybody that came into this country deported. Are we saying now that we're just going to wait for illegals to commit crimes? Like, there was a guy the other day, he threw a rock at a school bus, killed a girl, 8 years old. You're saying that if ICE had seen him the day before he threw the rock, we would have just let him stay? Why are we waiting around for people to commit crimes? I'm not saying you don't prioritize the bad hombres, but if you get swept up, you got to go. And when you send them home, it brings rent down, it brings prices down, it brings insurance down, and it brings wages up. So I hope the president maintains his resolve from what he promised the voters.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kayleigh McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.